how bad did it get for you? Like, what was your darkest moments in addiction and what made you hit your rock bottom? So maybe let's start with that.
Okay, sure. So there's two that's really standing out to me. I can't like if I held both of them up and side by side, they would be of equal darkness. So the first one, um, so I was being sold on the dark web by people that I was living with, and they were selling my body to gentlemen who was knocking me out with chloroform, Ambien, fentanyl. They were putting fentanyl in my drugs. They got me like purposely hooked on opiates because that wasn't my thing, right? And they were selling me for sexual purposes, making video and then selling the videos on the dark web. And when this came to light, like into my conscious reality, like I knew, okay, I had inclinations like something was wrong. But all of them, were gaslighting me, telling me like, wow, you really got to quit doing drugs. You're sick. Like this idea that you have in your head is completely fictitious, completely made up. You're out of touch with reality. And it was such an insane thought. I was like, yeah, I'm probably out of touch with reality. So like just completely ignoring my own intuition, which I also think is really dark, right? When I completely ignore the warning signs, the red flags, right? For the sake of just staying in something. And the thing that made it really dark was that when it came to light, and I knew that I would probably die from this kind of torture and abuse that was happening to me. So it wasn't this like, oh, maybe one day these drugs will kill me. It was like, no, this is going to kill me. Like I'm not well. I have a heart condition all of a sudden because of these things that are happening to me. Doctors are telling me like there's something going wrong here. You have to escape. You have to get out. And waking up sober the next morning was worse. In my head, I was like, I would prefer to stay here because at least I get drugs here than escape this situation or take the help that's being offered to me by supports in the community. Because if I wake up sober, I know that I can't handle that. I can handle this. At least I'm sleeping. At least I'm taken care of, drug wise. And so that was a pretty dark moment for me when the necessity to stop was absolutely there. The consequences were very high and I could not face reality being sober. So that was a pretty dark time. And I love in the big book because it says the mind and the body are marvelous things because mind endured this for 2 more years. And so that I endured that kind of treacherous environment for a really long time. And by the grace of God, the person that was masterminding that whole thing, he got picked up on a charge. And so it wasn't even that I finally gulled up the, the motivation to leave. That's not what happened. God intervened. He was arrested, and then I had to find a place to live. And the next place I went to live was with a gentleman who was a heroin junkie. And I guess the day that I called my mother and said, Mom, I need help. I got to get clean, was the day that I had decided in consciousness that him ODing constantly was really, screwing with my high. He was constantly ODing, and I was like, oh man, like I would say to him, like, you should really ask me when you're going to get high because I'm sick of having to Narcan you. Like this is really inconvenient for me. Like, like either quit or just die already, And so he was ODing, and I had just picked up some dope, and it's on the table, and I'm like all primed to really enjoy my night, And now he starts ODing, and I'm fed up, and I think to myself, screw this, let him die. And so this is my conscious thought that I'm going to be a person who does not save this person's life right now. And I ran through the scenario, like as he's turning blue, I'm running through the scenario in my mind of, okay, when the cops show up, when am I going to tell them? Will they believe me? Yes, I think they will. This is going to be okay. And in that moment, so you would think that would be dark enough that I turn into a person. I would prefer to kill you than to share with you, like, you know what I mean? Like that you think that's dark, but the dark thing that happened in that moment was that I got terrified that the next morning or the next day, couple days, once I got some sleep and woke up and realized what I had done, that I was going to have to be a heroin junkie myself to be able to blot out the consciousness of the reality of what I had done. And that scared me. I had never been scared of drugs before. I had never been scared of experimenting and trying a new way to get high. But having lived with a junkie for a year at that point, and seeing the pain that gentleman had to suffer in order to just get through 24 hours a day of his own addiction, I wasn't up for that kind of addiction. I was like, worse enough, I was already a crack addict, and the thought of having to be a heroin junkie was just overwhelming, and I knew that that's where I was going to go. For the first time in my life, I had a moment of clarity of like, oh my goodness, that's not what I want to do here. And so I Narcaned him. And I mentioned this in meetings a lot, but he woke up and went, "What'd you do that for?" I was like, "Oh man, like, Anyways, and it was that day, like maybe a couple hours later, that I called my mother and said, "I need help." So it was this beautiful, like, the thought process that went through my mind was like, well, nobody's going to know. And then there was this other voice that said, yeah, but I'll know. And, it's just me in the apartment. So I'm like, whoa, who was that? And that's my conscious. And I had blotted the conscious out for a really long time. Like, I was okay to do terrible things because I could justify them or reconcile them somewhere in my mind. And this one thing here, I could not reconcile. And I just want to say that, like, I had grown up in a really bad neighborhood in Toronto, lots of criminal activity, lots of really gangster, like, look at me, look at who I am. And if there was anybody else in that room with me that day, I might have pulled off my plan. But when I was left to just me and my creator, I couldn't. I knew that this was not me. I was like, no, I am not a criminal, a murderer. This is not me. And none of that had been clear before, other than that day. So those are the two darkest days in my addiction.